We are back and we are talking about the bench press. This is the Dumbbell Ben podcast. Follow me over on TikTok as well at dumbbell_Ben. We just talk about different articles in the research, usually coming from PubMed. I always try to keep them free. And we go into depth on the methodologies and the background of these different articles. Try to help you get a better idea of if the studies hold any weight for you in your training. I know a lot of times there's studies brought up that aren't necessarily that well vetted, and or there's cherry-picked one-liners in the studies that don't necessarily represent the data. Of course, you can't get everything from one single study, so keep tuning back in, getting more and more info on many studies, hopefully regarding all the subjects of health and fitness in the long run. Of course, today we're talking about everyone's favorite, the bench press, and we're looking into a study called The Effects of Bench Press Variations in Competitive Athletes on Muscle Activation and Performance. The aim of the study was to compare EMG activation on competition-style bench presses. Of course, they didn't just use the competition style. They used the incline, decline, wide grip, medium, and narrow grip. You're looking to see which one did the best EMG activation for the chest. Now, of course, just to couch this whole study, EMG activation doesn't necessarily mean the amount of muscle activation that you have or how much tension is going through the muscle. But it's kind of one of the best sketches we have as far as measuring it acutely. So that's what a lot of people use, but the EMG data doesn't always pan out perfectly. Coming into the study, it's been known that wider grips tend to hit the chest more, and that's also been shown in the data. Here it says that a previous study has already shown that a 200% distance. Here it's already been shown that a grip 200% as wide as your shoulders, or the biacromial distance, results in greater pectoralis major activation and lower activation of the anterior deltoid, which would also be good. I don't find that pans out in practice very much. People that bench really wide often have shoulder problems as far as what I've seen. But as far as the EMG research, lower anterior deltoid activation. They've also shown that the wider grip tend to activate the biceps more for what it's worth, which makes it more sense when you're really wide out like that. You almost have to pull the bar back in a little bit. Of course, there have been other studies that have shown that the sternal versus clavicular head can be activated to lesser or greater extent based on bench press incline. However, these studies are inconclusive in the fact that some of them show lesser degrees of activation in the sternal head when you're on incline, and others just show a greater activation of the clavicular head, meaning that some of them show kind of a decrease or deactivation of the lower pecs for incline, and some of them just show an increased activation of the upper pecs. It's a little bit semantics because either way you're looking to train your clavicular head if you're doing an incline bench press. But they're looking to get a little bit more of a clear idea about that. But one of the main things that they do here, and they say that that's their main goal, is that they're looking to train world-class athletes and see if these world-class athletes have a difference in the EMG data. I think this is actually really important because a lot of other studies are on recreational lifters or even newbie lifters, and they're trying to see what things light up on the EMG. If you're pretty new to lifting, pretty much everything's going to activate if you're doing an EMG because you're just trying to survive the lift. You don't really know what to use and using your entire body. These people that have been benching for a very long time, they know exactly what neural pathways to use. And so it's actually a little bit clearer of data on what the lift should work in the ideal situation. A little bit of a caveat to that is they might be so good at bench pressing that they'll use their entire chest no matter what for every single lift. So it might be a little bit of a catch-22 there. Now, some definitions for how they set up the study, they classified the maximum grip width as the maximum for the bench press competitions, which is 81 centimeters spacing between the palms. The narrow grip was set as the participant's biacromial distance, in other words, kind of the distance between your shoulders. And the medium grip was basically 50% between the narrow and the wide grip. For all these different lifts they were testing, they had the participants come in 2 times before the testing day and do familiarization sessions. This is important because maybe there's an athlete who rarely ever does an incline press. Maybe they just strictly do flat pressing, and so the incline press would feel foreign to them. They're world-class athletes. They're probably able to adapt to this pretty quickly, and there's not too much of a difference between the different variations, but they did have 2 familiarization sessions. Hopefully getting them used to it, and washing out any novelty effect that it would have. They did have only one testing day for all 5 different variations. Now again, these 5 different variations, if I wasn't clear before, were the incline press, the decline press, and the flat press, done at 3 different grip widths. So 5 total tests were done, and each of them were done to a 6 rep max. The 6 rep max I really like because it's a little bit less arbitrary than a 1 rep max, and I know people will be mad at me for saying 1 rep max is arbitrary, the ultimate measure of strength, but the vast majority of people are not training with 1 rep maxes, and the vast majority of people should not be training with 1 rep maxes. There are some different systems you can make 1 rep maxes work under, or if you're in a peaking phase, but the vast majority of people should not be training with 1 rep maxes. So the idea is to figure out which one of these exercises best activates the chest muscles. And if you're looking at this gives you a better idea because it's 6 rep max, which is closer to your regular training loads. Most strength and hypertrophy athletes are training anywhere from the 5 to 15 range. You know, the strength athletes more in the 3 to 6 range, right? So this gives you a little bit more of a real idea whether it's perfectly correlated with a hypertrophy athlete or not. I don't know, well, not really, to be honest, but it does give you a closer idea than doing a 1 rep max test. They were giving plenty of time to rest between sets, 3 minutes between each warm-up and 5 minutes between each test set. That's very good. The only thing that I couldn't find in here is whether or not they randomized the order of the testing. It might have been nice to have part of the athletes start out with the flat press, part of the athletes start out with the incline press. I can't see if they randomized that at all. There is only 12 athletes, so even randomizing it isn't going to give you a perfect correlation. For instance, maybe you do a flat bench press first, and if you did all the athletes doing the flat bench press first, you're going to tire out the sternal part of the chest. And once that's tired, maybe get higher activation on the incline. But if you would have started with the incline, maybe you would have gotten them all activated on the incline. So not having a randomized order of the bench press variations makes this a little bit hard to read of which one's actually superior. Again, if they would have randomized it, I don't know if this would have fixed it anyway, because there's so few athletes that randomization doesn't accomplish what you would want it to. If they would have had 24, 36 athletes, that would have been a much better study. Of course, these are world-class athletes. It's hard to get 36 world-class athletes all to come to your test on the same day, or rather on the same multiple days. So I don't blame them, but that is one thing to take into account here. Now, they didn't just measure EMG activation for the chest. They also measured other muscles. They measured the biceps brachii, triceps brachii, anterior deltoid, posterior deltoid. They measured a lot of different muscles just to see which other muscles were contributing during each bench press variation. This chart summarizes it up pretty nicely. I'll zoom in here to the left side so we can look at the percent difference compared to horizontal bench press. What you'll see here is the triceps brachii is actually less activated on the incline press. Going down is less activated. And over here, the biceps brachii is significantly more activated on the incline press. So that was something that surprised me anecdotally. I've never felt that. I've never felt bicep activation on the incline press. Maybe it's because I'm not an advanced enough lifter. Let's go over here and look at medium grip versus narrow grip width. So you'll see here the biceps brachii was significantly less activated on the narrow grip width. And by their chart here, nothing else is significant. Here are the same values, just in table form. Again, they're showing that the biceps brachii was less active in the narrow grip, which makes sense. And right here we see that the biceps brachii was more active in the incline group, and the triceps brachii was less active in the incline group, just like I'd said before. Also, the anterior deltoid was less active during the decline, which makes sense as well. A lot of people feel that much less in the shoulders than they would in a flat bench press. So let's go into some of their discussion of their results. Here they say the main finding of the study is that performing a 6 rep max bench press on an incline bench resulted in lower triceps brachii activation, but higher biceps brachii activation compared with the flat decline bench press. And of course, similar levels of activation in the pectoralis major, sternocostal, and clavicular parts were observed in the flat bench compared with incline and decline bench press position. So, in other words, this study showed that the chest, both the sternal head and the clyidal head, both were very active in every single lift that they did. Now, of course, as I just said, these were elite level athletes, so were they specifically good at turning on every part of their chest for every lift in order to achieve every last bit of strength out of every lift they did? Possibly. And actually, probably. That's honestly probably true. But it's interesting to see that people who are really good at form, who know their bodies, right, and who know how to do neural drive, actually can get essentially the same amount out of every lift. They turn on their chest essentially to maximum levels with every lift. There were slight differences with how much the deltoid was turned on, how much the bicep was turned on, and how much the tricep was turned on. These differences weren't huge, right? And honestly, most people do the bench press to train their chest. So that's the most important thing that we know is activated with every lift. So I would say the most important thing to get out of that study is that for the secondary effect of whatever lift you're wanting to have the variation in mind. So if you're wanting to get greater activation of your upper chest, you can try the incline, but really it's probably going to hit your whole chest. What I would more do is say, I want to get a little bit extra tricep activation, so I'm going to do a narrow grip or a decline bench press. Or I want to get less tricep activation, I'm going to do an incline bench press. One other thing to note though is that previous studies that have shown an increase in the clavicular head activation for an incline bench press were actually done using a Smith machine. And this one was not. This one was done using a barbell. I don't know if there have been studies before or since then that were done using free weights as well. If you've seen any, feel free to link them to me. But as far as this study's background, they say that previous studies were done using a Smith machine. So it's possible that when there's that free weight component, at least with the barbell, perhaps not with dumbbells, but at least with the barbell, when there's a free weight component, it might be that it activates the entire chest regardless of what bench press variation you do. So if you're really wanting to activate the clavicular head of your chest, maybe try doing an incline bench press on a Smith machine. Another thing to note is that the bar path was actually greater, or rather the range of motion was greater for the incline bench press. So it's possible that the incline bench press could be better for building the upper chest, not only because there's greater activation in some studies of the clavicular head, but also because it just has a greater bar path, which means more time under tension and could be better at building the upper chest, as well as just a good movement to include in your training in general. One thing I really like about this study is that they did use a 6 rep max instead of using isometric contractions, which were used in many previous studies. One thing I do like about the study is that they used 6 rep max rather than isometric contractions. Many studies using EMG research will use maximal isometric contractions. I don't think that's very useful because no one trains that way. So I did like the fact that they included that in the study. Of course, I think the greatest takeaway from the study is they actually say here in their conclusion is that you can use many lifts to build the chest and you don't have to stick with just one. You can use one for a few months and then switch to another one. This is going to reduce your overall risk of injury and allow you to make your training much more sustainable in the long run. Of course, also listen to your body, see which one feels the best for you. If one of these just doesn't feel good, feel free to take it out of your training. That's the good thing about the study is it does show that even with 1 or 2 of these in your training routine, you can still get great chest activation. Of course, EMG studies are not the exact same as muscle activation, as I said before, but just a rough sketch. Test out yourself. If you feel it in the muscle, you're probably doing a good job. Keep at it, keep increasing weight, vary it every few months, and you'll be on your way to gaining size and strength. Check in next time for a study on hip thrust variations and how they compare to the squat and to other lifts on both performance and glute growth. I know that's kind of one of those controversial movements that some people think is absolute garbage and some people think is, a standard for glute strength. We'll be going into some of the details on that. It's actually a systemic review of the literature, which means it's reviewing multiple studies and kind of putting the data together aggregate. So it's a little bit stronger than a single study like I normally review. So tune in next time for that. And also follow my TikTok channel at Dumbbell_Ben and hope to hear from you soon.